Good morning. Happy Tuesday. Welcome into 104.3 The Fans Coffee Break. We've got James Merrill, Rachel V. Hill, Cecil Lammy, and DMACC will also be joining us here in just a little bit as they are at the Walton Penner Group press conference with George Paton. James, we listened to it for the last 30 minutes. I honestly thought it was going to go a little bit longer, so I'm glad we got to listen to the entire thing. But what was your biggest takeaway? And then we're going to get to some of the questions here in the comments.
My biggest takeaway was Greg Penner. He's in charge, right? Like there's no doubt of who's running the show. And, you know, as a longtime Broncos fan, I came away very impressed. He was emphatic about giving the team all the resources they need. Winning is paramount. What they saw on Sunday was an embarrassment. I thought all of that was great. He certainly has neutered George Paton a little bit. George is still there, but he doesn't have all the same responsibilities that he had before. So we'll see if George is there, in a month or so. But I was very impressed with Greg Penner. That was my number one takeaway. The Broncos have someone in charge again, and doesn't mean it's going to turn around overnight. But I'm confident that they're going to keep working at it and keep putting resources toward it until they get it right.
No, I'm 100% with you. First of all, I love that he apologized to the fans, right? Saying like, this is completely unacceptable. And I also love the fact that they used the game on Sunday with the word embarrassment, because it was an embarrassment to the entire Broncos organization. And I just like that they put it out there. I feel like sometimes with, these owners or GMs or even coaches, they're unwilling to say those things. It's kind of like, oh, that's on me, so we're not going to use those harsh words. But I really like the fact that Greg Penner went out there and said that. We're seeing all the comments. Wardell says, I think this ownership group is the best thing to happen to the Broncos in years. Do you agree, James? Or do you have to wait and see a little bit?
Look, just the fact that they have an owner, right? And no disrespect to Joe Ellis, but you can't make the same decisions when you're a de facto owner as you can when you are the owner. You can make the hard decisions. You can eat contracts. You can buy your way out of problems. So the fact that they have an owner, one, is good. Two, his no-nonsense approach, and, not in a mean way. I don't think he threw Nathaniel Hackett directly under the bus, but the fact that it was establishing standards, I thought was great. So, look, there have been a lot of really good things to happen to this team in the last 15 years. Sometimes we forget about that. John Elway coming back, and after the Josh McDaniels era, he came in. That was big. Getting Peyton Manning was big. We'll see if getting Russell Wilson was big in terms of good or bad, but that was big. Getting an owner with deep pockets who's committed to winning, that was big. I'll agree with that portion of it.
What did you think about the comment around Russell Wilson and George Paton almost coming out and saying whoever the quarterback will be, but then catching himself?
Yeah, it was not a good day for Russ by any means. It's a contrast to really for the last, 9 months, everything has revolved around one person. I came away today feeling like Russell Wilson is one of 53, and that's how it should be. Now, he's the quarterback. And you have to make sure that the head coach is in sync with the quarterback. But it was also like, well, he needs to be in sync with whoever the quarterback is, not he needs to be in sync with Russ. I think not having this team be so Russ-centric is good. That's valuable. That's the right direction. And look, it was a little bit of a challenge to Russ. And Greg Penner said he expects Russell Wilson to put in the work and come back and be the player they expected him to be. I would agree with that. George Paton cited the 2 games Iowa cite in terms of, hey, we've seen flashes of Russell Wilson, right? It was the first half against the Raiders. He was 11 of 12. It was that first quarter against the Chargers. He was 10 of 10. Okay, if you can do it in small doses, that means you could theoretically do it for an entire game, for an entire month, for an entire season. Mm-hmm. He's got to put it together. This is a team that needs to challenge Russell Wilson. And he needs to recommit himself to football and recommit himself to the Broncos and stop worrying about being a celebrity and you're building your brand and all those other things. I think today was kind of day one in the challenge being put forth to Russell Wilson, all of which is good. I'm on board with that 100%.
No, I am as well. And I believe Cecil Lammy is backstage, so we'll get him in here in just a second. But when you go to Russ, was it almost like, we've talked about it so much about the walking on eggshells part. Do you think that was still true? And do you think that they actually fully believe in Russ? Or do you think it's, hey, we're committed to him financially, we have to be? Cecil, how are you this morning?
This was a tough day, but it's a tough day that has good hope for the future. I really believe in Greg Penner. Like, if I was a fanboy, if I was to go Nathaniel Hackett on Russell Wilson, if I was to be a fanboy, I'd be a fanboy on Greg Penner right now. I mean, I've said it before, I've said it again. Great business people know how to do great business. And Greg Penner, very business-like today, agree 1,000% with James. This is not a good day for Russell Wilson. It doesn't need to be a good day for Russell Wilson. This is about the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos have been terrible. Now they're going to be better. And they're going to be put on the right track because they have someone up top who's done it before in different industries, I know, but they know how to build a winner.
Yeah, and you know what, Cecil, you make a good point about a great business person. One of the key attributes to a great business person is they can make the tough decision, right?
Yes.
They don't waffle. They don't go back and forth. It's okay, this is what needs to be done. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be a fun conversation. It's not going to be a fun meeting. And this is going to be short-term painful, but long-term beneficial. We saw today, not only with Nathaniel Hackett, but with George Paton, that he's not afraid to make the tough decision because he point blank said the new head coach will report to him, not to George Paton. I mean, that's breaking news right there because that is a change in the football operations structure. That's a big difference. That could not have gone over well with George Paton, but Greg Penner doesn't care, nor should he. So the fact that he's willing to make those tough decisions, I thought that was fantastic.
It was fantastic. And if there was a button he could have pushed for all of my buzzwords today, identity, culture, fit. This is not a good day for us. It wasn't a good day for George Paton. George Paton seemed like a guy who's like happy and lucky to have his job.
Accountability, discipline. Those were another couple of words that he mentioned. Accountability is kind of a buzzword. Like, I get that. Like, they're always going to say that. But the fact that he didn't think this team had discipline, which we all agree with, right? The most penalized team in the league, the nonsense going on the sideline and on the field. But to come out and say that they were an undisciplined team, that's calling the players on the carpet, right? Because you shouldn't have to have a coach tell you these things. It's calling the coaches on the carpet. It's George Paton. It's everybody that allowed it. I thought that was fantastic as well.
Cecil, as you were waiting for the press conference to start, what was the mood or energy in the room?
Yeah, the energy in the entire building was just one of, this is tough. This is a tough day, but it's the right move. So there was like a circle the wagons type of mentality, a very, again, business-like atmosphere. I guess we shouldn't be surprised, but it didn't feel like Happy Fun Baby Star. It didn't feel like Camp Russ or whatever, like it felt like, okay, this sucks. Let's get back to basics. Let's circle the wagons. Let's do this the right way. Was just talking to Steve Atwater, Hall of Famer, when I left, and I said, Steve, I believe in this ownership group now more than ever. I mean, just what Greg Penner was saying, he understands it. And the way he was saying it, as James emphasizes, this is the NFL. You don't normally get to peek through this type of keyhole. What we saw today and the way that people were called out professionally, but the way that they were called out is very rare. I've covered this since 2003. I've never seen a day like this.
No, yeah, we agree. Well, Cecil, as always, we appreciate all of your insight. We will catch up with you later, and make sure to check out all of Cecil's pieces at denverfan.com. James, you mentioned, George Paton being neutered. We'll use your words there, but would you say he'll be back after the draft? Huh?
Is that the wrong word?
I mean, it's just an interesting way to say it. I'll say that. But again,
okay.
I'm a female. You understand it. We don't have to go into.
All right. What was your question? Sorry.
No, you're totally fine. Would you just say with the way that this has happened, would you anticipate him being here after April?
No, I wouldn't. Now, they did mention a couple of times, both George Paton and Greg Penner, that they have a good roster. They have good young talent. So that would lead me to believe that to some extent, Greg Penner thinks that George Paton has done a good job building the roster. But I didn't get the sense at all that George Paton was a key cog in this process, the moving forward process. So no, I don't think George Paton is a long-term fixture here at all. Now, I will give George Paton credit. He came out and totally owned it. This is 100% on me. I picked the coaches. I picked the players. Okay. I mean, to some extent, if somebody takes full responsibility, if you're their boss, you can either say, okay, good, now let's go do it better next time. Or you can say, well, thanks, but that's a fireable offense, right? Like, you can't just continue to beat up on them when they take full responsibility, because it's like, well, what more do you want them to say? What more do you want them to admit? So he didn't really have much choice but to put himself under the bus. But to Cecil's point, that's something you don't see very often either, right? Like, we saw Nathaniel Hackett every week at his press conference say, yeah, we got to be better. And it starts with me. And it just felt like lip service, right? Like, it felt like Patrick gave him that bullet point and he went out and read it and said it. But did he really believe it, or was it just a talking point? Yep. I feel like George Paton really did feel like it's completely his fault. And you know what? It is. So I think it's close to a flip of a coin if he'll be here after the draft. But if you made me guess, I would say no, because I don't know that Greg Penner wants him here. And I don't know that George Paton wants this job here. Now, he's probably going to only get this kind of job if he goes elsewhere, but it's tough to be somewhere where you've been, had your knees cut out for you, or whatever word we want to use for it. If your responsibility was here and now you're here, it's like going from being a head coach to an assistant coach with the same team in the same year. Tony Granato had it happen one time to the Avs. I can't think of another example in 50 years. So I don't know that that's a position he wants to be in either.
Yeah, no, either neutered or got his knees cut out. Is that what you said?
Chopped at the knees. Yeah, I'm trying to come up with a better word. It's neutered.
Chopped at the knees, one way or another. Well, we do indeed have the clip in case you were unable to watch the press conference of George Paton taking full responsibility. Take a listen.
I take full responsibility for where we are as a football team. I brought in the head coach. I brought in most of the players. Those are my decisions, and there's no one to blame but me. And I just want to be clear. This isn't just about the coaching. This isn't just about Nathaniel. This isn't about the entire football operation. This is about the personnel, the players, the staff, everyone involved with our football team. It has to be better across the board. I have to be better.
I have to be better, he says. It was almost like you said, you felt like it was coming from his heart a little bit. I'm putting words in your mouth there, but it felt meaningful from both Greg Penner and George Paton. And I think that's something that this entire season we've been missing for sure. But I'm kind of with you. I don't know if he comes back, and maybe they do this coaching search together, and, Greg Penner's seeing where George Paton's views align and where they agree and where they disagree. And if they're disagreeing on certain things, maybe that's when Greg Penner says, we don't have the same values moving forward.
Yeah, and boy, he listed a lot of people that would be involved in the process. And, George Paton was in there, but Condoleezza Rice, and she was involved with the coaching search at Stanford. And, I mean, how far down the pecking order is George Paton going to be? Like, he's below anybody that has an ownership stake, and there were 4 or 5 people he mentioned. So I just feel like George Paton, was trying to take accountability today, or responsibility, and be accountable. But Greg Penner just seemed like he was, okay, thanks, but that doesn't forgive the sins, right? When he was asked what he had learned, one of the things he said was how to deal with contracts. Well, which contract do we think he's talking about? It's the huge one they gave the quarterback before he'd ever played him down in orange and blue. Like, some of those things are like, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you accept responsibility for it, but they're kind of unforgivable if they don't work out. It just felt to me like they weren't on the same page in terms of philosophically how they want to approach this. And if you made me bet, I don't think George Paton is around come June, but Will I be shocked if he is? No, because again, I think it's pretty close to a coin flip.
Oh, Lauren says we should keep George Paton. Rhett says Paton is an honorable man, but not a great GM. I think a lot of people kind of have these 50-50 views on George Paton.
It's not a personal thing. It wasn't a personal thing with Nathaniel Hackett either. I think he's a really nice guy, and we all enjoyed his introductory press conference.
Do you think he'll be a coach in the NFL ever again?
Yeah.
Oh, you
know how that'll happen, though? If Russ gets fixed, he'll never coach again as a head coach. If whoever comes in here next year struggles with Russell Wilson and they have to move on from him, Nathaniel Hackett will definitely get another chance. It depends on who. We got to find out whose fault it was. Was it Hackett's or was it Russell Wilson's? That's going to be what determines it.
And who do you think?
I think it's Nathaniel Hackett's. And George Paton kind of hinted at that when he was telling us that, from week to week, we were a hodgepodge on offense, and we were not consistent. We would do one thing one week and not the next week. And we saw that. Like, they ran the ball really well against Arizona. They didn't run any of those plays against the Rams. It was amazing to me. But the fact that George Paton said what he learned about the coaching process last year was that maybe he should have talked to more candidates. He talked to 10.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have talked to more candidates. All right, you go watch some film and put together our draft board. You're not involved in this process anymore. Good grief.
Well, both you and I loved Kevin O'Connell. We thought I don't remember if Kevin O'Connell was your number one guy, but I know you loved him. He was my number one guy. So now you see the success he's obviously having with the Vikings, and man, it just kind of hurts.
Yeah, he was my number one choice. And part of that is the Sean McVay thing, right? But Matt LaFleur was with Sean McVay. 3 years in a row, they won 13 games in Green Bay. Zach Taylor was with Sean McVay. Hey, the Bengals went to the Super Bowl. Give me the next guy in line of young, wonderkind who's the smartest guy in the room. That felt like Kevin O'Connell to me. So to me, a head coach has to be needs to be type A, very meticulous. And that was just the part of it that Nathaniel Hackett didn't have. And, we saw it on a daily basis. He was never on time for his own press conference. He sets the time, right? Like, if coffee break started sometime randomly around 10:30 every day, it'd be like, man, we got to put somebody in charge of this that can actually hit a deadline. It was just, he doesn't have that trait. I think he's a good coach. I don't think he's a good head coach.
Do you know who was always right after Hackett and always on time?
Ejiro Evero.
Okay, so what do you think? We've talked about it a lot at the beginning of the season, especially coming in as interim. We find out that he was offered the interim head coaching position, turned it down because we're assuming that he's going to probably interview for other coaching positions after the season is over. So why do you turn it down if it's him? Is it because if he goes out there and then they fail for the next 2 weeks that it hurts his coaching chances? Or if you're Evero, why would you turn it down?
Well, he's really good friends with Hackett, and to some extent, you're getting a professional leg up on by the fact that your best friend or really good friend got fired. That kind of feels, a little bit wrong's not the right word, but I don't know. It feels a little slimy to me. So he probably didn't want to do that. And it's 2 games. It's not like Steve Wilkes in Carolina where you can actually show what you can do and how you can make an impact. And it's a chance to put it on your resume. Steve Wilkes may not get the Carolina job, but he's going to get a job somewhere, and they're going to say, look what he did with the Panthers. He got them back in the playoff race taken over. There's no chance for Ejiro Evero to do that. They're not beating the Chiefs this week. So you're 0-1 for out of the gate. Maybe they beat the Chargers because the Chargers may not be playing for anything. They're kind of, figuring out where they're locked in with their wild card spot. So it's a no-win situation. Who wants to sign up for a no-win situation? I wouldn't.
Also, do we remember yesterday how you were joking about Jerry Rosburg taking over as interim? Well, James, you got your wish, I guess.
If you'd have told me we did coffee break Monday of the season opener, right? Broncos were playing at Seattle that night. If you'd have said, what kind of odds will you give me that Jerry Rosburg is the head coach for week 17 and 18? I would have been like, first of all, who's Jerry Rosburg? He's not one of the 30 coaches on the staff tonight. It's kind of hard to comprehend how quickly it changed and how it went from here to here in 3 months. It's remarkable.
It's crazy, that's for sure. Okay, well, we do have DMACC. I know a lot of people in the comments are saying, where is DMACC at? Well, he was at the press conference. And DMACC, good morning. How are you?
Good. Just timing wise, I was able to get home. That's how close I live to the Broncos facility. So,
Nice.
so I am back from the facility, and I'm glad that me and Mike Kliss asked the only two hard questions of the entire press conference. I thought Greg Penner flunked that press conference because it's pretty apparent he doesn't know what he's doing. And it was emasculating, to say the least, to have George Paton sit next to him because he certainly doesn't know what he's doing. So we heard, some, embarrassing and harsh language, but you saw a couple guys that, I mean, holy cow, blind leading the blind. I'm hoping somebody has a clue over there because these two don't.
Huh.
Whoa. DMACC, always a straight shooter. DMACC, why do you say this? James and I both walked away thinking, Greg Penner's in charge. He's grabbing it by the you-know-what and taking control.
You couldn't tell me one example of what he said that he knows what he's doing. Give me one example.
A specific example of, well, first of all, I'll give you one. He's not letting George Paton run the coaching search. That's clear that he knows what he's doing, right?
Good deal. What else?
Okay, well, if he'd have said, hey, George is going to do it again, the guy
Listen, James, stop. Why is George there?
Because you can't have just total chaos in this transition. You have to have
Of course you can have Darren Muji tell you where the bathrooms are. There's other people that no, hold on. This is important. This is critical to this whole thing. Why couldn't he, when I asked him, why do you still have faith in George Paton? Why couldn't he give us one solid example?
Because he doesn't. So George Paton is there to bridge. He's a bridge. It's why I said, 5-10 minutes ago that come April, May, June, I don't think George Paton will be here after the draft.
Okay. Well, listen.
I liked that. I liked that he neutered George Paton. That was good. I liked that he was willing to call it like it was and say, hey, this was embarrassing and we were undisciplined. And you don't hear that kind of stuff normally in an NFL press conference. He wasn't worried about hurting anybody's feelings. I like that he's already taken a deep dive on the whole wellness program, talking to people in the league office, trying to figure out what in the world is going on here. Lauren Landau can get his resume, fixed up because he's not going to be around. He's
willing to say that the next head coach will report back to him.
Yep.
All right, this is all silly. Here's the deal. It's clear they're going to throw a huge amount of money at Sean Payton or Jim Harbaugh to try to get them to be the next guy. These Penner Waltons, they bought a toy and it was broken underneath the tree. And the last thing they imagined was trying to figure out how the train works, not just watch it go around once they bought it at Christmas. It's a disaster. This has all of a sudden become a real job. So you're giving him credit for what? Doing a job? Like asking questions?
Okay, well, wait. What would you have wanted to hear today?
George Paton should be gone. George Paton should be gone today.
Probably will be. He probably will be. He's a figurehead at this point. He was so neutered today. I mean, come on. Like short of firing him, it was as close as you can get to it. And it's simply to have a bridge so it's not complete and utter chaos. But the people, the culture, it all needs to change. It all needs to be blown up. I don't think this is just going to be on the football side either. I mean, you don't need to get into all that, but that organization a year from now is going to look so much different. And what I got out of Greg Penner today was we came in here in August thinking, this is great, and realized, oh my gosh, we have bought a mess, and they're going to fix it, and they're not going to spare any expense to fix it. And my favorite word that I heard from him? I'm impatient. I don't want a guy that's patient. I want impatient because I'm not going to be patient. I'm impatient about it too. It's a league with the salary cap. You can fix things quick. We see worst to first every year. The Jacksonville Jaguars are probably going to win their division and have a home playoff game. I don't want a patient guy. I want a guy who goes, this is BS, and starts having heads roll and will write big checks to fix it. That's what I heard today.
I saw a guy that, said some nice words. He may end up knowing what he's doing. Maybe. He doesn't know what he's doing right now. I mean, we are flailing at answers right now. Now, listen, you hire Sean Payton or Jim Harbaugh, specifically Jim Harbaugh. I don't want to mess around. I want a 5-year, $100 million deal to Jim Harbaugh, money and power, and then fine. And he'll have all the say. I mean, George Payton, you're right about that. I mean, at least he got that sort of right. But I'm sick of sort of things. I want things to be done the right way, period. So, all right, I'll give you a little grace. Maybe he gets it all the way right with George Payton. And you get it all the way right with George Payton if he has no power or he's just not there. You know, there was a very specific reason why I didn't ask George Payton a question, because it doesn't matter. You know, the questions need to be asked. Anybody asking George Payton a question today, check your watch to see what time it is. I mean, that was absurd that anybody for any reason would ask George Payton any questions. We have a billionaire that has talked twice, and you want to ask a question to George Payton? He talked at when he bought the team, and he talked in England to like the 4 or 5, you know, invited reporters in the back of the pub, and that was it. You're asking George Payton questions? I mean, don't let the door hit you, George.
Okay, well, the guy who made that situation the reality deserves some credit. And here's the other thing I liked. He said he would have liked to have been patient. He would have liked to got to the end of the year and had a chance to think about it and make a decision. But then once things changed and you had the disaster on Christmas Day, a 50 burger, you didn't force a punt for the first time in 50 years, fights on the sideline, fights on the field. He didn't sit there and go, yeah, well, but our plan is to wait till the end of the season. It's like, nope, your ass is gone. That's how it ought to be. That's how it ought to be.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to make the playoffs this year, you should have made this decision at the bye week. That's how obvious it was. You waited until, I don't know what you were waiting for. You know, you don't. Listen, I think Greg Penner seems like a bright enough guy. And, you know, I don't know, dude, it's so hard when you're born on third base and you think you hit a triple, you know, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he knows what he's doing. Go ahead. What?
Now, look, I'm with you. And when I was sitting at the game in London, I'm there as a Broncos fan. I'm excited. And my buddy's like, this is probably the worst thing that could happen. Like, it would have been better off if they'd have lost.
Yeah.
Probably. But here's the thing. I think we learned in the last 24 hours, part of the reason you don't make that coaching change, who was going to take the job? Ejiro Evero? He already turned it down.
I would have taken my chances with Evero at that point.
But maybe
listen. We have another fundamental disagreement, you and I, James, and Rachel. I don't know exactly where you are on this, but
I think Russ's problem number one.
Yeah, and Damian Woody on ESPN Day, he didn't mess around. Good for Wood, man. He was like, Russ is cooked. And I'm like, yeah, he's cooked. And, you know.
We're fixing to find out. We're fixing to find out.
Well, we are. And listen, I'm disappointed that George Payton is still around here. I'll just assume he will have no major decisions coming his way, period. I mean, he won't on the coach. And as soon as they hire the coach, well, that's it, right? I mean, then we get ready for free agency and the draft, and he can find the Jonathan Coopers. You know, who's the next linebacker from Alabama that's, you know, got a medical issue that sees him drop in the draft? George, go to the East-West Blue-Gray Shrine Bowl and buddy up with Cecil with a hot cup of Joe on the sideline where it's rainy in Mobile, and you can figure out that. But when we're talking about the big things that matter, okay, coordinators, quarterbacks, that sort of thing, and man, we better have a competitive situation at quarterback, even if Russ is still here.
Well, and here's the thing with regard to why Payton is still here. There's really no reason to fire him now versus a month from now. And here's what I mean. You go through the coaching process and you decide Jim Harbaugh's the best guy. He'll take the job. Jim comes in and says, here's who I want as my GM. All right, see you, George. You go through the process. And Dan Quinn is the guy you think is the best option. Well, then you might decide to keep George because, hey, we want to have a head coach and a GM who are on the same page and work well together. Okay, well, then it's a good thing you didn't fire him. You can fire him down the road. There's no reason to rush it. The only reason to rush it is he's so toxic. We don't want him in the building. I don't think he's that. He owned it today. I'll give him credit for that. and B, he's going to mess up the process. He's not even involved in the process. Condoleezza Rice is going to be more involved in this process than George Paton. So what's the problem with having him around? He probably makes a good cup of coffee.
Wow. I never thought I'd see the day where James Merilatt would sit on the fence and hem and haw, but here we are.
I'm keeping my options open.
Yeah. It's like,
All right,
what happened to you? When did you become so soft, James?
Oh my gosh. Oh, here's my other thing though. The Penners came in, right? And Greg Penner especially came in and said, we're going to learn about all this football stuff. Like, we've never been involved in it. We're going to learn from it. Okay, if he's making the decision of who's going to be the next head coach, but he's never been involved in it, what's your concern level there if they do have George Paton around for this entire process, but we don't trust George Paton's decision-making, James?
No, I really don't have much concerns. They're going to make whoever they hire, they're going to throw the most money at ever. So
that means they have to go for a veteran head coach then?
Yeah, there's 4 guys. There's just 4 guys. That's it. You know, it's maybe just 3. You know, it's Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, and Dan Quinn. I mean, that's it. That's all you got. So,
well,
you know,
those are the only 3 unless the people we talked about yesterday become available. Belichick, Tomlin, McVay. That changes it. How concerned am I? I'm a little bit concerned. Do I think Greg Penner would have been able to tell that Kevin O'Connell would have been a really good head coach? No. Do I think Greg Penner can look at Jim Harbaugh's resume and he won at San Diego in college? He won at Stanford. He won at San Francisco with the Niners, and he turned around Michigan. Yeah, he can read a resume and he can write a check. Okay, that's the way it's going to go.
So that makes me believe that it's going to be a veteran. They're not going to take a chance on a first year. James, I know you said that you're kind of okay with that situation, but I mean,
I would take a look at a first-year guy. 9 of the 14 coaches in the playoffs right now are first-time head coaches, but they're not going to.
No, but the problem with that is they won't necessarily have personnel control. You can't do that. And first-time coaches in general do not have final say on personnel. They can coach, that's fine. Maybe they amp up to it. But we have got to, because you didn't eliminate George Paton, mistake, you've got to mitigate him. So, Rachel and James, I understand what you're saying. But the only way you could do a first-time head coach, NFL head coach, would be like David Shaw, somebody who has been a college coach who has overseen personnel. And, you know, that's not even good enough because you're going to need somebody with NFL experience in this particular situation. Who's going to want this job? Jim Harbaugh will want this job. If you throw, listen, and I hate to just throw away, you know, money. I mean, Jim Harbaugh almost got cut by Michigan. He had to renegotiate with them. And I don't even like Jim Harbaugh. And I'm slamming the table. I don't. I'm not a Jim Harbaugh fan for a variety of other reasons. But I can clearly see under this set of circumstances. Now, James, I'm going to give you something. First-time coach. Listen, man, I was there with you, dude. You post June 1st designate Russell Wilson. You get rid of him. You tank it out. You get rid of George Paton. You go 0-17, and you draft Caleb Williams. Let's go. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. So in that scenario, yes, a first-time coach would be fine. But you would have to have reassurance that it's okay to do that. You pointed it out. Bad word. I mean, I know you liked it, but impatient can be a bad word, dude. It means that you're just going to be desperate all over again. And if you really believe that Russell Wilson is the answer, you got some problems, man. You got some problems.
Well, listen, if you want to go with your plan, just let Jer Bear coach next year. I mean,
fine.
We're going to tank for a guy who could be, you know, Baker Mayfield, or he could be. I mean, there's so many. He could
James,
be.
James, if you want to put an interim, James, hold on. If you want to put an interim designation, and Steve Wilkes is working under that title right now, so is Jeff Saturday. I know a head coach up at Oregon State baseball. Hate to bring that in. He was an interim coach for an entire season, and he didn't get the job. You can have an interim coach for an entire year. I'm fine with that. I have no problems with that as long as you get rid of George Paton and get rid of Russell Wilson, which I think you should do.
No qualified candidate is going to come in here with the cut Russell Wilson after June 1st plan.
Yes.
Not because they love Russell Wilson, but because for 2 years they're fighting with both arms tied behind their back because they take a $60 million and a $47 million. It ain't going to happen.
All right,
If
fine.
listen,
Listen, the Broncos haven't listened to one of my ideas for the past 8 years. So why start now? I mean, you got rid of the fourth biggest problem. First problem, Wilson. Second problem, Paton. Third problem is injuries, to your point. You got to figure that out better. Fourth problem was Hackett. He's still a problem. He's still one of the problems. But you got to resolve your big three problems now. So I'm all in on Jim Harbaugh. I'm all in on a 5-year, $100 million deal. Get it done. George Paton can go, I don't know, go get, like you said, Jim Harbaugh coffee. And we'll set up a competitive situation for Russell Wilson, because it was Jim Harbaugh that insisted on continuing to play Colin Kaepernick after Alex Smith, who was a playoff quarterback at the time, got healthy from injury. But Jim Harbaugh knew the best option for my team right now is Colin Kaepernick. He was right about that, and I do trust that he'll make the right decision on Russell Wilson.
Who is the 6 names that we just talked about? Who is most likely to be able to control Russell Wilson? Because I don't believe all of them can come in here and take it.
Jim Harbaugh.
Oh, of the 6? So you're including Tomlin, McVay, Belichick.
Because
Harbaugh.
Even though, Hackett's gone, you guys, this still all revolves around Russ. So who's going to be able to go in there?
Dan Quinn would be last on that. And somebody's got to be last. I think he'd be last. Bill Belichick, who's going to argue with him? So he'd be 1.
He doesn't know what he's doing, though.
Fine, but the question is who can control Russ? Mike Tomlin, if Mike Tomlin, for whatever reason, they part ways in Pittsburgh, I would sign that contract in 30 seconds.
I would too. You're bringing up a weird sort of outlier. Of course, I would hire Mike Tomlin. I mean, Mike Tomlin's, I have more respect for Mike Tomlin than any other coach in the NFL. Why exactly would he not be with the Steelers?
You just hear rumblings out of Pittsburgh that it's all becoming kind of tiresome. Now, this was more when they were 7 than now that they're 7-8. But, that would be – we're also talking about Jim Harbaugh, who's under contract at Michigan, and his team plays, Saturday night in the college football semifinal? So that's a hypothetical. McVay is under contract with Peyton's under contract with the Saints. Yeah. None of these guys are available other than Dan Quinn.
No. Harbaugh is the most available. He's got a buyout clause. It's just money, dude, with Harbaugh. That's the easiest one. It's the most painless one by a mile. Tomlin.
Am I thinking of a different head coach who last year got the big contract extension because he said he for sure would stay with the team? Wasn't that a major news breaking thing last year? And I know money pays, but am I putting a wrong name to that storyline?
No, you're right, but he did he interviewed with the Vikings last year, right?
But didn't that happen after? Didn't he sign that contract extension after?
He went back to Michigan. He got the big contract, but clearly he's interested in returning to the NFL. They were in the college football playoff last year too, and he interviewed with the Vikings. So I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility.
How is Jim Harbaugh, the world's biggest egomaniac, going to turn down the highest paid coaching job ever in any sport? You really think he's going to turn that down?
No, I don't. I think he would jump at it.
Me too. It's not that hard.
Another voice. Shall we, everybody? We've got Andrew Mason in the back. We're going to bring him in. We'll ask him this exact same question, James, but go ahead and finish your statement right there.
I don't feel like Dan Quinn is a big enough name and a big enough swing based on what I heard today from Greg Penner. I don't think he wants to roll out there in a month and introduce the head coach. The next head coach is the guy who blew a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. I just don't.
Fine by me.
Mace, how are you this morning?
I'm just ducky. How are you guys doing?
Angry.
Angry. Yes. What a surprise.
So, Mace, DMACC walked away from the press conference not impressed at all. James and I walked away impressed. Where do you sit?
Yeah, I'm more with you guys than with DMACC. I wanted to hear I'm sorry, and I did hear I'm sorry. I wanted to hear things about accountability, and I did hear that. The one thing I think that that can be thought too much of is, he's still learning about football, but I don't think it's simply a matter of, okay, I've got all the answers. He's looking for people who have the answers, right? That's what people who are CEOs do. Is it's not necessarily where, okay, it's my way, it's going to be done this way. They want to have people who have the ideas and then put them in the position, and that's what he's looking for from a head coach. And it may well be in time what he's looking for from a general manager, because boy, oh boy, that was an emasculating 30 minutes for George Paton up there.
Rightfully so.
Yeah.
We got neutered, chopped at the knees, and emasculating. There we go.
Yeah.
3 words of the
All are
day.
accurate. All are accurate.
All
Yeah,
are accurate.
I mean, sorry, Rachel.
Mace, he couldn't give an example of why he's keeping George Paton other than George and I talk every day. That was it.
I think you're not going to say that if you're going to get rid of somebody, you're not going to say that today, right? Would it at all surprise me if Greg Penner has looked at some best practices around the league, and one of the best practices with a general manager is, if you're going to make a move, you do it at the end of their annual cycle, which is after the draft, right? Not before. We saw in 2009 what happens when you get rid of personnel people before the draft, because that's what Josh McDaniels did in 2009, 2 months before the draft. And that draft was a disaster, okay? That's why you don't do that. You look at the Buffalo Bills, a very smart organization, and when they brought in Sean McDermott, they kept Doug Whaley on the job through that draft cycle, and then after the draft, they made the move, and they brought in Brandon Beane to be the GM. I would not be surprised if we're looking at a new person with personnel after the draft, based on the vibe I got today.
I know what you're saying, and I loved how Greg Penner said, we're going to have the coach report to me. That's how it's done, mostly in the NFL. I thought that was a very cute moment that he studied maybe like 3/4 of the NFL. I mean, that does happen in the NFL under certain circumstances, but it doesn't in other circumstances. And I would have loved to follow it up. Oh, really, Greg? Like, what's your favorite example of that? What team has that model that you really want to emulate? But then again, that would be, I don't know if this is an open book test. So that might have been a tough question right there.
I mean, there are three models. There are three models. You're going to hire a coach in January, dude. The draft is until April. You can fire George Paton now, have a coach who's going to be in charge of personnel. He's going to have plenty of time to get up to speed with whatever scouts and establish a draft that he wants. The problem keeping Paton around is you keep all of Payton's people around. So you have another confused situation. You could have just cut to the quick and got rid of George Paton, and it would have been a much more appealing job for a head coach that he knows he doesn't have to deal with George Paton and all his people. It's an open room for you. It's your team. Now the new coach is going to have to deal with this guy and this guy's people. And this is Greg Penner simply not knowing what he's doing. And it's frustrating to have the owner of the team, after 4 months, not understand what the hell's going on because he's talking to George Paton every day. What do you think George Paton is telling him every day? I mean, Greg Penner needs to go have a beer with somebody down at the local corner pub and talk to some of the damn fans. He needs to get out of the ivory tower and get with some real Broncos fans. Get to a tailgate party. Do something, Greg. Nobody knows who you are. You'll blend right in. Put on a hat. See, hey, that's well and good, but they're hearing from the fans. They're going when they put out those surveys and they get comments back. They are hearing. They know what the fans think. I'm more interested in Greg Penner talking to people who have an idea on best practices around football, talking with former coaches who've been successful, former GMs who've been successful, even current and former head coaches and GMs, if that's what it takes, other owners. What's worked for you? What hasn't? That, I think, is actually a more productive thing here.
Give me one reason Sean Payton or Jim Harbaugh would want to work with George Paton.
They won't. And you'll fire George Paton then.
Well, right? Are you promise?
So, I mean, if they'd have hired a new GM in San Francisco before they hired Kyle Shanahan may not go there because he wanted John Lynch, and John Lynch came after that hire. Like, to me, you got to figure out who's the coach you want, and then who's the GM that pairs with him. Maybe it's George, maybe it's not. Probably not George, and then you go hire him.
And you know what? You might be talking about a new GM then when you have a new coach. I mean, I've spelled out the scenario where it might be after the draft, which I'm sorry. I know you and I are never going to agree on this, DMACC, but I think it's lunacy to blow up years of draft prep, years of scouting, and I've seen how that's destroyed drafts over the years. So if you are going to make a move, the time to do that is after the draft. You're talking about 3.5 months, okay? And then you have the GM to work with the coach, and it's fine and dandy, okay? The problem is everyone wants something now. I want it now. Maybe it'll take a few months to actually get everything in place. That's okay.
Well, and when Elway was hired, he came in to oversee football operations. Brian Sanders was here for what, 2 drafts?
2 drafts.
And then they got rid of him. If they hired,
not a smart move.
Is Peyton Manning ready to roll in day one and handle the draft and handle all that stuff, or does George Payton then turn into his Brian Sanders?
Whoa, we're talking about Peyton Manning now?
Yeah, well, there's so many scenarios. Like, you have to keep your options open. If you just come in and blow out George today, it limits your options.
Well, and DMACC, you've said no matter what, you named the 2 biggest names, obviously, with Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh, but you've said money will do anything. Yes. Okay, well, if someone wants to pay me $10 million to go work with somebody I'm not exactly a huge fan of, I'm probably still going to do it.
Yeah, it's just an unnecessary speed bump. It's more hesitation. It's more hemming and hawing. And Mace, there's a difference between, reading a bunch of survey results and actually talking to human beings. I have so much respect. It's one thing to say we have the greatest fans in the world. It's another thing to actually go talk to them, like really go talk to them. And
they were talking to him in London.
What's that? They
were talking to him in London.
Keep talking to him. I mean, you're allowed, even here in America, you're allowed to talk to fans. I mean, the whole concept, this ivory tower sort of concept of football management, I'm just done with. The greatest thing about Pat Bowlen is that Pat Bowlen really did come from the streets. He really did. And, he had to fight and claw his way to own the Denver Broncos. It really meant something to him. And then, he became super wealthy and, you probably put on your fur coat after that point. Who knows? But there was a time where Pat Bowlen was really from the streets. And I just am I'm not really worried about it, guys. So maybe I'm just angry that things that are going to happen eventually, they're all going to happen. They're just not happening as quickly as I would like to see them because we're hedging our bets on this, that, and the other thing. All sorts of bull crap. It's going to happen. Russell Wilson is cooked, and George Payton doesn't know what he's doing. So that will eventually resolve itself, and I would just rather see it happen now. I've been through this. It was years and years and years until I mean, people were like, oh, you were right about Josh Allen over Bradley Chubb. I mean, duh. I was right about it the second it happened, and it just took years to, get there. And then what did the stupid Broncos do? They make the same dang mistake again when it came to Surtain and Fields. And I'm like, oh, DMACC, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, really? Oh, so now how do we feel about it? That our Pro Bowl player is just part of a defense that gave up 48-351 points. I'm trying not to blame them for the defensive touchdown. So 44. There you go. Thank you. Sorry, math, Syracuse. So, yeah, that's our guy, huh? Well, he really tried hard to tackle Higbee, whoever the freak that is at the goal line. Talk about just giving up. I mean, it was embarrassing. I'll give you that. And George Payton, I'm embarrassed, and it was embarrassing, and it starts with me. Damn right it does, dude. Why are you here? What are you doing here? How does your key card still work?
Oh, you know what though? Sorry to Rachel. I mean, Greg Penner got up there and said he's impatient. DMACC, I think you got a lot of Greg Penner in you. Yeah. You seem very impatient.
Me and Greg should go for a bike ride together. I know he's a triathlete. Let's do a loop around Cherry Creek, and then we can sit down and have some coffee, and I can tell him what the deal is.
That'd be great. I'd love that. Let's do it.
I don't need anything from Greg Penner. I don't need any favors. I don't need any money. I need nothing. In fact, he went to Georgetown the same time I went to Syracuse. I technically should hate him. I don't hate him. He went to the wrong school. I went to the right one. Whatever. We all make mistakes. That being said, I'm looking at, me and Greg Penner are the same age. We're both 53. And I look at George Paton like a kid. I look at George Paton like a kid who doesn't know what he's doing. And I try to struggle. Like, he brought up his 14-year-old. Me and Greg Penner are empty nesters. My son is got a job and lives on his own. I got another kid in college. Greg Penner is an empty nester. We need somebody with some gravitas around here, not somebody babysitting his teenagers, bringing up his 14-year-old. Listen, I've had it. I mean, I have literally freaking had it. And I hope Greg gets it right, but he didn't get it all right today. And I thought it was a lot of billionaire bullying, frankly, amongst the media, that they're like afraid of the guy because he's a billionaire. And I'm sick of that too. So I'm over all of it. And, you don't have to look far, guys. And I'm sorry, James, I'm yelling here. I'll shut up here in a second. But all you have to do is look at your cousin-in-law to see how to do things the right way, okay? I was at that game on Christmas night. That was freaking awesome, what the Nuggets were doing. We just went through the most exciting time ever with the Stanley Cup Final with the Avalanche. They got the Coyotes in the College Arena tonight. I'm fired up for it. You do not have to travel far to see how things are done the right way. People to talk to. You just got spanked by your cousin-in-law in a $5 billion stadium who is having a hangover on a Super Bowl championship. You don't have to go far. Like Deion Sanders says, Prime's got it right. I'm easy to find, Greg. I'm right here.
I wish I would have started the second DMACC started talking to see how long that rant actually was, because we went on all the spectrums of everywhere. I'm going to switch this conversation a little bit because I see a lot of comments about it. And Mace, I'm actually surprised because I don't think I know your response to this. Is Russ cooked or can he still cook?
I think next year is about finding out the answer to that. Because here's the you don't want to hit that, DMACC. I don't care. Look, you owe him $107 million in terms of like what's counted against the cap going forward, right? If you cut him before the 5th day of the league year in March 2024, it's $100 million. It's $107 million no matter what. So basically, as long as he's not on the team in 2024, the outlay is going to be the same. It's just a matter of how many years you're dividing it over and when do you want to swallow the pill. I am content with saying that next year is about figuring that out because it's not costing me any more resources to do that over time. That's why I'm doing that. I'm not doing the tear down everything like DMACC says. And look, realistically, they're not going to do that either. So I have wrapped my arms around next year. You're trying to fix Russ, and if you don't fix Russ, you are swallowing the pill in 24 and you're moving on. Okay. So, but I honestly don't know if he's done or not. And I think, yes, next year is mostly about finding that out.
I don't think he is, but I'm open to the idea that he is. But the prudent thing to do is you have to find out. It's like doing it. It's a scientific method, right? You got to change one thing at a time.
Yep.
All right, with Hackett or Wilson. Well, when you bring in a new head coach, a new OC, you're going to find out. If he's bad with that guy, then it was a Wilson problem. You have to find that out for sure, especially because if you cut him and designate him as June 1st, other than feeling better about it, it doesn't help anything, right? It doesn't help you cap space this year. It doesn't help you the following year. It doesn't help your cash outlay. It doesn't help you tank because if you're right, and he's so awful, the best way to tank is run him out there 17 times. So you gain nothing other than feeling better about yourself that you got rid of him and you kicked him to the curb. You might as well find out for sure, was it Wilson or was it Hackett? There's no downside in doing that.
No, I mean, you may win. The nightmare is you win 7 games next year with Russell Wilson. That's the nightmare.
Sure.
There you go.
But
and that defense,
If problem number 1 is Russ, then they will tank. I mean, they were number 32 on the power rankings today that were released. So,
Rachel, here's what they're going to do, though. I know what they're going to do. I hate to see things so clearly ahead of time. They're going to Tebow up the offense. I know what they're going to do. They're gonna build an offensive line. They're going to be much more physical. They're going to rely on boot rolls and putting them under center. And you know what? It's going to be more efficient. It's going to be boring, but it's going to be the problem is Russ can't run. Like in the Tebow offense, Tebow could actually run, but you're gonna scrape your way to 6 or 7 wins next year, and then what? Then we're having the same conversation all over again. You are not going to be in the right position next year with Russell Wilson. See, I'm giving him a little bit of credit here, James. I'm saying you're going to win 6 or 7 games. You're going to stumble into them with Russell Wilson next year. You are. I'm just, listen, man, I am not giving Mike Evans any freaking credit at all because this is a terrible plan. But I am praying to God that they get some sort of free agent quarterback like Baker Mayfield or maybe Baker Mayfield, and they draft Hendon Hooker, and you give it a shot. And I don't care if Russ is
welcome aboard on Hooker.
Well, yeah, I'm there with you because you can. But this is a terrible plan. Let me emphasize again. This is a terrible plan, but it's the best terrible plan I can think of. I will tell you this: I will be beside myself if they don't bring in any kind of quality free agent quarterback and they do not draft a quarterback in the 4th or 5th round. And listen, I would freaking hate it because it's a waste of a draft pick taking somebody in the 3rd round as a quarterback. But I'll give it an exemption this year because this is how bad it actually is. They've got the 20th overall.
Is that they need someone for the O-line. They need to fix their O-line, but they need to bring in a backup quarterback for competition. And we have a list of free agent QBs available as well. Tom Brady, that's a beautiful name. Wouldn't that be quite the QB competition? Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Jimmy Garoppolo, Teddy Bridgewater, Daniel Jones, Case Keenum, Mason Rudolph, Jacoby Brissett, Geno Smith, Joe Flacco, and Andy Dalton.
You're missing one name. If we're here for chaos. Drew Lock!
I mean, here's the problem with Drew. He doesn't have the right. You need somebody with some sauce. You need somebody with some attitude. You do need like a Baker Mayfield, somebody that gets everybody. You need to have a disruptor, and Drew's not a disruptor. Neither. What's that? Andy Dalton? No. Tom Brady? That's ridiculous. Of course.
You needed Mayfield. You should have claimed Mayfield off waivers weeks ago, like we all said.
And by the way, Sam Darnold, you guys realize the Panthers are close to making the freaking playoffs.
Okay, but is that a Darnold thing or that's a Wilkes thing? I think that's a coaching thing.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
320 yards last week. Great job, Sam Darnold. You handed the ball off like a pro.
Yeah.
Your backup quarterback has to be somebody that plays a style similar to your starter, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Baker Mayfield.
And he has to be somebody when you get to this point of the year, you can say, you know what, go play that guy. At least it gives us something to shoot for. We can see what we have in the future.
Two-year, $15 million deal for Baker Mayfield and draft Hendon Hooker. And let's have some fun.
Fine. I'm down with that. But don't give me Mason Rudolph and Andy Dalton and, he's going to come in here for competition. It's that kind of name is insanity to me.
2 for 15 for Baker Mayfield, draft Hendon Hooker, and Russ is there. And let's see how it goes.
Are you saying $15 million a year for Baker Mayfield or 15 over
15
2?
for 2.
Okay. Why would he take that?
He wouldn't if he doesn't have. If he has a better offer.
He's gonna have a better offer than that.
Oh well, I don't know, Mace. I don't have your crystal ball, but I mean, whatever. What's he gonna have, Mace?
What's he gonna have? Problems. You're gonna spend $7.5 million on a year on a guy you hope never plays. No, I'm not. Draft Hendon Hooker. That's your backup. If Russ is out, good. You turn it over to the young guy and
Hooker's not gonna be physically able to play till like halfway through the year.
Well,
and
great.
Russ is gonna
Russ will make it that far. $7.5 million a year on a backup quarterback when you have this many holes, I just can't justify that.
You don't.
That's a good point. Well,
hey, fine. Get ready for 7 wins and I don't know.
If they had Baker this year, how would their season have been different if they had Baker this year? He would have beat the Jets. Okay, that was a Brett Rippon game, and then
you would have had fans in the stands for the Cardinals game. Let's just start there. We would have had excitement here, something to talk about. You would have rested concussed Russell Wilson for the rest of the season, and you would have had hope. You would have had hope and excitement, and You know, that's what
a lot of hope, because there's a lot of quarterbacks who flame out in 3 different places in one year, and they turn out to be the guy that saves the team.
James, did you not see the game on Christmas? Was your head buried in a tree? Were you high on gingerbread? What did you miss?
Did you see him the week before in Green Bay? That was a wonderful.
It was like 3 degrees, James. It was freaking ridiculous. Oh, so what are you saying?
The Little League mom.
Where it was 0 degrees, house boys, perfect weather.
He's played 2 good games out of 3 for a guy who just freaking showed up this month. That's pretty good.
He was terrible in the first game, except for 4 minutes. He was awful. They had 3 points with 4 minutes to play in the game. I know, because they got me eliminated from my eliminator pool in that one. 3 points with 4 minutes left.
James,
that was
what do you want?
money.
Let's back up here. I'm screaming at James. I feel like I'm talking to Mike Evans because he's upset about everything, but not giving any solutions or presenting anything that he actually wants. James, I'm sorry. You have the floor. What do you want, James?
I told you what I want. Russell, you go get a coach and you find out once and for all if it was Hackett, Wilson, and Harbaugh would be at the top of my list, but let's see who else becomes available. I would draft someone like Hendon Hooker. You bring in a young quarterback that plays a similar style, who you can turn to with 6 weeks to go if the season is lost, and at least see what he can do. I'd bring back Drew Lock before I'd go sign Mason Rudolph or anybody, most of the other names on that list. I'd be fine with that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Well, this conversation continues on tomorrow, everybody. I saw you hanging out with us. I know we've been on here for an hour. We've appreciated everybody hanging out with us in the comments. Cecil also.
Who am I going to yell at now?
Yeah, me at 5 o'clock.
I was going to say Orange and Blue today. Cecil and Mace will take over. Come hang out with us tomorrow morning, though. I see everybody in the comments. We love reading them. We appreciate you all hanging with us this morning for the yelling, screaming that has been this entire show. But thank you guys so much. 10:30 tomorrow morning. We'll see everybody then. Bye, everyone.
I want to personally apologize to our fans and all of Broncos country. We know that we need to be better, and we will. The new head coach we hire will have every resource available to them and the full support of our ownership group to build on our winning and championship tradition here.